Hi everyone, it's Jack from Jack's English, and today I'm starting something that has been requested so much by my students. I'm going to be starting a grammar tense series, and today we're going to start this series with the present simple. So what is present simple? Present simple expresses repeated actions, such as jobs, hobbies, or habits. And it can also express scheduled events for the future. But we're going to look at the uses later in this video. We'll start off with the basics and look at the form. The affirmative form, negative form, and question form. So starting with the affirmative form, I work, you work, he, she, or it works. Now, this is the third person. Don't forget the S. This is a very common mistake I see among my students, even at advanced level. Don't forget the S. So he works, David works. Okay. Next one, we work and they work. Now, some other common examples. I study, David studies. I exercise, you exercise, she exercises. So don't forget that S. Let's move on to the negative form. We can see a similar pattern with the negative form. Everything is do not work or do not verb, except for here, the third person, where it becomes does not. So again, don't forget he, she, or it does not verb. Now, another tip that I want to give you is to contract. I really think it sounds so much better, more fluent if you contract. So in this case, do not becomes don't. I don't work. You don't work. You don't exercise. Does not becomes doesn't. He doesn't exercise. She doesn't study. So don't forget your contractions. I think at a lower level, even though you're a beginner speaker, try to start building that habit of contracting. So that's the negative form of present simple. Finally, the question form. So again, it's the same kind of pattern. Do I work? Do you work? Does she work? Does he work? Don't forget to put the ES on the verb do. So the third person again is the difference in this whole pattern. Also, don't forget your intonation. Do I work? Do you work? Don't forget to go up at the end on the question form. So that's all of the forms. Let's now look at the uses, how we actually use the present simple in real life. Use 1, repeated actions. These are obviously actions that happen generally and they are repeated. So perhaps you do them every day, every week, or every month. Now, when you think about repeated actions, I want you to think about 3 particular types: job or work, hobbies, and habits. Repeated actions always come into those categories of work, hobbies, and habits. So let's start by looking at some examples and see how they fit in those categories. So the first one, I usually eat breakfast at 7 a.m. This is a habit. Another thing that I want to point out is I've highlighted the word usually. Now, there are adverbs that express frequency. These adverbs are always, which means 100% of the time. Usually, which is around 80% of the time. Sometimes, about 50% of the time. Rarely, 20% of the time. And never, 0% of the time. So I want you to memorize those 5 adverbs and use them freely with today's grammar tense. Always, usually, sometimes, rarely, and never. I usually eat breakfast at 7 a.m. The next one, she works, don't forget the S, in an English academy. That's work. In the 3 categories, that's work. The final one, I sometimes, 50% of the time, play golf with my friends. I sometimes play golf with my friends. Which of the 3 categories is that? It's hobbies. So habits, work, and hobbies, these are repeated actions, which is the first use for the present simple. Use 2, facts and generalizations. So let's look at the first example. The Earth orbits the Sun. Remember, the Earth is the third person, and therefore we need the S, orbits. Orbits means to travel around. The second one, babies cry when they are hungry. This is a generalization. It means that generally it's true. Babies, the plural, cry when they are hungry. So that's the second use, facts and generalizations. Use number 3, non-continuous, or sometimes you'll see it written as stative verbs. Non-continuous or stative verbs. So this is a bit tricky, but I've simplified it into 4 different categories. Now, I'm going to teach you this quite simply today for this video, but I'll do a video on this subject alone in the future because it's quite a deep subject. For now, let's look at these 4 categories and some examples. So firstly, the 5 senses, our 5 senses: smell, sight, taste, touch, and hearing, sound. I see the end of the tunnel. I'm seeing the end of the tunnel? No. So all of these are right now, but don't use ing. That's why they're called non-continuous verbs. You can't use the ing form. I see the end of the tunnel. Emotions and opinions. I love cheesy pizza. This is my real example. I love cheesy pizza. I'm loving cheesy pizza? No. Grammatically, that's wrong. Possession. Do you have your passport? Are you having your passport? No, that's not possible because this is a non-continuous verb in this case. Do you have your passport? And finally, states of being. The flask contains water. So as I said, this is a very simple explanation of stative or non-continuous verbs. We'll look deeper at that in the future, but for now, go on Google and find a list of non-continuous or stative verbs so that you know what to use without the ing form, without using that ing form. The final use, use 4, is something we can consider the advanced use. You must understand uses 1 to 3 first before you start studying use 4, because this is a little bit more advanced, and I often hear people make a mistake with this use. So firstly, I very often hear my students say present simple means near future. That's wrong. It doesn't mean near future. It can be near future, but it can also be far future. It doesn't mean it's just near future. So let's see what it actually means. The present simple used in the future means that the event is scheduled, the action is scheduled. That doesn't mean that it's just booked at one time like an appointment. Appointment happens one time. A scheduled event means that it happens repeatedly. So if you look at my examples, you'll notice that these are commonly repeated actions, but we're focusing on one particular one in the future. So it's a bit confusing. Let's look at some examples to help with that. The first one is, the last bus leaves at 11 p.m. Now, this is referring to the last bus today, perhaps, and it leaves at 11 p.m., which is the future. Now, why do we use the present simple? The bus is on a timetable. It's a repeated schedule. Maybe every day or every week, it finishes at 11 p.m. on that day. So we use the present simple to show that is a scheduled, a timetabled event in the future. The bus leaves at 11 p.m. Number 2, I go to church this Sunday. Now we know this is just the future because it says this Sunday. So it's an upcoming Sunday, the nearest Sunday. I go to church. Again, it's a repeated action. So this is the connection to the present simple overall, is that everything is a repeated action. That's the easiest way to remember. This is a repeated action, going to church, but we're focusing on this Sunday. Number 3, I fly back to England this Christmas. This is my example. Now this one means that my flight is booked, the planes have a timetable, and perhaps, for me, perhaps I go back to England for Christmas every year. Now, unfortunately, that's not true for me, but this is my example. I fly back to England this Christmas. Normally, flights are on a timetable. So, we can use present simple for future scheduled or timetabled events. And that's your last use today. So that's our first grammar tense lesson, the first I've done on this channel. And it's going to be the start of hopefully a long series covering all of the grammar tenses. It will start easy with present simple and present continuous, but it will get quite hard later on. Now, to summarize today's lesson, we started by learning the form and then we studied 4 uses. Number 1 are repeated actions, which can be work, habits, or hobbies. Number 2 are facts or generalizations, things that are generally true. And number 3 were non-continuous or stative verbs which can't be used in the ing form, so we have to use the present simple. Finally, we learnt the advanced use, which was scheduled events in the future. So thanks so much for watching today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Please review and ask me any questions you have. Also like and subscribe because it helps me grow as a channel and make more content for you. So have a wonderful week and I'll see you very soon. Bye bye.